think about the last time you ruined something. Not slowly, not over months of neglect or years of quiet erosion. The other kind, the fast kind. The kind where one moment everything was intact and the next moment it was not, and the distance between those two states was less than 60 seconds. Maybe it was a message you sent. Your thumbs moved before your mind caught up, and the words left your hands still hot, still sharp, still carrying the full weight of something you felt but had not yet understood. You hit send, and in the silence that followed, that specific silence, the one that arrives after you have done something you cannot undo, your chest did not tighten with satisfaction. It tightened with recognition. The recognition that the person who sent that message was not the person you want to be. Maybe it was something you said, in a kitchen, in a car, in a room where the air had been thickening for minutes. And then, in one exhale, you released a sentence that you had been holding behind your teeth, not because it was untrue, but because the way you said it the moment you chose, the temperature of your voice, turned truth into a weapon. And weapons once swung cannot be unswung. Maybe it was a decision, a resignation typed in anger, a door slammed that could not be unopened, a line drawn in a voice so absolute that even you were surprised by it. And now, weeks or months later, you live on the wrong side of that line, wondering how something so permanent could have been born from something so brief. Now look at all of these moments together, not one at a time, all of them. Lay them side by side and notice the pattern. They did not happen over days. They did not happen after careful deliberation. They happened fast, faster than thinking, faster than wisdom, faster than the part of you that knows better could reach the part of you that was already moving. 60 seconds, sometimes less. That is the window, the narrow corridor between the moment a feeling ignites in your body and the moment your hands, your mouth, your decisions translate that feeling into action. And in that corridor, in those few dozen heartbeats, more damage is done to relationships, careers, trust, and self-respect than in all the calm hours combined. Most people have never been taught to see this window. They have been taught to manage their emotions, to calm down, to breathe, to think positively, but no one taught them about the architecture of the moment itself. No one showed them that between the spark and the fire there is a space, and that space, if you learn to inhabit it, changes everything. Not because it makes you calmer, not because it makes you passive, but because it gives you back the one thing that emotion, in its first surge, always steals: choice. That is what this is about. The 60 seconds that separate a life shaped by reaction from a life shaped by intention. Let us see what happens inside those seconds, and what becomes possible when you learn to stay in them instead of being carried through them. The anatomy of the surge. Before you can master the 60 seconds, you must understand what happens inside them. Not as an idea, as something you have already felt many times, but never slowed down enough to observe. It begins in the body, always in the body, before any word forms, before any thought crystallizes, before the mind has produced a single coherent sentence. The body has already responded. The stomach drops or tightens, the chest compresses, heat rises into the neck, the face, the ears, the jaw locks, the hands change. They clench or they go cold, or they reach for the phone with a speed that has nothing to do with decision and everything to do with reflex. The breath shortens, not dramatically, just enough that the rhythm shifts from the slow, deep pattern of someone who is present to the shallow, rapid pattern of someone who is reacting. All of this happens in less than 2 seconds. And here is what most people do not realize. This physical response is not the emotion. It is the body's preparation for action. It is the ancient machinery of survival, the same machinery that once prepared your ancestors to fight or flee from genuine danger, activating in response to a text message, a look, a tone of voice, a memory that surfaced without warning. The machinery does not know the difference between a predator and an insult. It responds to threat. And the modern world is full of things that feel like threats without being ones. Disrespect, rejection, betrayal. Loss of control, the sudden realization that someone you trusted is not who you believed them to be. The surge is not your enemy. It is not a malfunction. It is intelligence, fast, ancient, designed to protect you in moments where thinking would be too slow. In the environments it was built for, the surge saved lives. It moved the body before the mind could hesitate. It chose action over analysis because in the presence of a real predator, analysis meant death. This was not weakness. It was the deepest form of intelligence your body possesses. But you are not facing a predator. You are facing a conversation, a disagreement, a wound to your pride, a crack in your expectations. And the surge, faithful, unthinking, unable to distinguish between a tiger and the tone of voice, activates anyway, at full power, in your living room, and in that activation a clock starts. 60 seconds. The surge will peak, it will fill every corridor of your body and mind, and then, if you do nothing, if you simply wait, it will begin to recede. The chemicals will metabolize, the heat will cool, the breath will deepen, the jaw will soften, and the part of you that was buried beneath the wave, the part that sees clearly, that weighs consequences, that knows the difference between what feels right and what is right, that part will surface. But 60 seconds is a long time when your hands are reaching for the phone, when the sentence is already forming behind your teeth, when every cell in your body is insisting that this moment requires immediate action. Most people never make it through the 60 seconds, not because they are weak, because no one ever told them the seconds existed. Begin here, the next time you feel the surge, and you will know it by the body, not the mind. Do one thing. Look at a clock, any clock, your phone, a watch, the numbers on the microwave, and count, not to distract yourself, but to see, to witness the surge as it moves through you, to watch it peak, and to feel, perhaps for the first time, the moment it begins to fall. You will be amazed at how short the peak actually is, and how much wreckage can be created in its brief reign. And once you have witnessed the surge from the inside, a deeper question emerges, the one that determines whether you remain a prisoner of the 60 seconds or become their master. In the moment between the match and the fire, there is a space, and it is not a metaphor, between the feeling and the action. Most people experience this space as nothing, as an absence, as the non-existent gap between I felt it and I did it. When they look back at the wreckage, they say, I just reacted. As if the reaction and the feeling were one event, one movement, one seamless, unavoidable process. But they are not one event, they are two, and the distance between them, though it may be a fraction of a second, is the most important distance in your entire inner life. Think of an archer. The arrow is nocked, the string is drawn, the target is clear. But between the full draw and the release, there is a moment, a breath, where the archer holds, not because the archer is hesitating, not because the archer is afraid, but because the archer knows that the quality of what follows depends entirely on the stillness of what comes before. A rushed release sends the arrow wide, a held release sends it true. You are the archer, the surge is the draw, and the action, the message, the word, the decision is the arrow. Every time you release without holding, the arrow flies from the force of the draw, not from the clarity of your aim. And arrows released without aim do not miss the target. They hit the wrong one. The space between the draw and the release is not emptiness. It is a most active moment in the entire sequence. It is the moment where the body's urgency meets the mind's discernment, where the speed of instinct encounters the depth of wisdom, where you decide, though decide is too slow a word, whether this action will serve you or betray you. Here is the distinction that changes everything. Responding is not the same as reacting. Reacting is the body's first offer, fast, unfiltered, driven entirely by the surge. Responding is what becomes available when you hold the space long enough for a second option to appear. The second option is almost always better, not because it is calmer, not because it is weaker, but because it has been informed by something the first option does not have: awareness. Awareness of the situation, awareness of the consequences, awareness of who you want to be on the other side of this moment. Reacting says, this is what I feel, therefore this is what I do. Responding says, this is what I feel, now what do I choose? The difference is one breath, one pause, one refusal to let the match touch the kindling before you have decided whether the fire is worth lighting. Not every fire is wrong. Some situations require flame. Some moments demand the full force of your conviction, your anger, your refusal. The practice is not to prevent all fire. It is to choose your fires instead of letting your fires choose you. Begin with the hands the next time the surge comes, and it will come in the most ordinary way. Not in a crisis, but in a comment, a look, a small provocation. Watch your hands. Where do they go? To the phone? To a fist? To a gesture that speaks before your voice does? Hold them still. Just the hands, not the emotion. You cannot hold that still, and you should not try, but the hands you can hold. And when the hands are still, the action is delayed. And when the action is delayed, the space opens. And in the space, you will find something you did not expect, options. And once you learn to find the space, once you learn to hold the draw, a deeper layer of the pattern becomes visible. The stories that move faster than truth. The surge is only half of the problem. The other half is what your mind does in the seconds after the body ignites. Because the mind does not stay silent during the surge. It narrates instantly, automatically, with a speed and certainty that feels like truth, but is, in fact, something very different. You feel the heat rise in your chest, and before you have taken a single breath, the mind has already written the story. They did this on purpose. They do not respect me. This always happens. I knew I could not trust them. They are trying to control me. These stories arrive fully formed. They do not knock. They do not ask for verification. They simply appear wearing the clothing of truth. And they drive the next action with an authority that is almost impossible to question in the moment. But question them you must, because the stories that appear in the first 10 seconds of a surge are not conclusions. They are interpretations, and interpretations made under the influence of the surge are about as reliable as a compass held next to a magnet. The needle moves, it points with absolute conviction. But it is not pointing north. It is pointing toward the nearest source of distortion. Your pain is the magnet. And in the first seconds of the surge, every interpretation bends toward it. This is not a flaw in your thinking. This is how the mind is built, under pressure. The mind does not seek truth. It seeks certainty, because certainty, even false certainty, reduces the discomfort of not knowing. And in the middle of a surge, when the body is hot, the breath is short, the chest is tight, the discomfort of not knowing is unbearable. So the mind grabs the first story that fits the feeling and calls it fact. They meant to hurt me, feels better than. I do not know what they meant. Not because the first is pleasant, it is not, but because it is certain. And certainty in the middle of chaos feels like ground beneath your feet. Even when the ground is false. Think of a river after a storm. The water is muddy. You cannot see the bottom. If you reach in and grab the first thing your hand touches, a root, a stone, a piece of debris, you do not know what you are holding. You only know that you are holding something. And in the urgency of the current, holding something feels safer than holding nothing. But the root may not be a root. It may be a branch that snaps. The stone may be loose. The debris may have edges you cannot feel until the damage is done. The stories your mind produces in the first seconds of the surge are that blind grab in muddy water. They feel solid, they feel certain. But they were not found through seeing. They were found through urgency. Here's the practice, and it is difficult. And it will feel wrong the first many times you try it when the story arrives in the surge. Do not believe it, do not disbelieve it either. Just hold it the way you would hold an object you found in dark water, loosely with curiosity, knowing that you cannot see its true shape until the water clears. The water will clear. It always does. The surge will pass, the chemicals will recede, and the mind will regain its ability to see past the nearest interpretation. And what you see then, after the 60 seconds, after the muddy water has settled, may be entirely different from the story that arrived first. Perhaps they did mean to hurt you, perhaps they did not. Perhaps the situation is more complex than any single story can hold. But you will not know, you cannot know until the water is clear. And the discipline of waiting for clear water before acting on the story is the discipline that separates those who build their lives from those who repeatedly dismantle them. Begin with 3 words. When the story arrives, immediate, certain, compelling, say to yourself silently, I don't know. Not as defeat, not as passivity, as honesty. Because in those first seconds you truly do not know. And admitting that you do not know is the most powerful thing you can do in a moment when everything inside you is insisting that you do. And once you learn to hold the story loosely, one final territory opens, the one where the 60 seconds become not something you survive, but something you inhabit. IV, the art of the held breath. There is a difference between waiting out the 60 seconds and being present inside them. Most people, when they first learn about the space between feeling and action, treat it as something to endure. They white-knuckle through the surge, they grit their teeth, they hold their breath, literally, and count to 60 and then exhale with relief, as if they have survived the test, and this works. For a while, it prevents the worst actions. It stops the message, the sentence, the slammed door. It creates a gap where there was none, but it is not mastery, it is containment, and containment practiced over years creates its own damage. The damage of suppressed energy that has no outlet, of emotions that are blocked but never processed, of a person who has learned to stop reacting but has not learned to fear. Here is the distinction. Suppression is holding back the action while ignoring the feeling. Presence is holding back the action while fully inhabiting the feeling. The two look identical from the outside. A person who suppresses and a person who is present both stand still in the surge. Both remain quiet. Both refrain from the impulsive action. But inside, the experience is entirely different. The suppressor is clenching, fighting the wave, treating the emotion as an enemy that must be contained. And the emotion, pushed down, does not dissolve, it stores, it calcifies. It becomes the tightness in the shoulders, the short temper over small things, the quiet resentment that leaks into every interaction weeks later. The present person is not clenching, they are breathing, not the shallow breath of containment, the deep, deliberate breath of someone who has chosen to feel the full force of the wave, without being carried away by it. They are not fighting the emotion, they are standing in it. The way you stand in heavy rain. Not dry, not comfortable, but grounded, present, aware that the rain is temporary and that standing in it is not the same as drowning in it. Think of a tree in a storm, the rigid tree, the one that refuses to bend, that holds its shape against the wind with every fiber. That tree breaks, not because it is weak, because rigidity under enough pressure becomes fragility. But the tree that bends, the one that lets the wind move through its branches, that sways without snapping, that yields without uprooting, that tree survives. Not because it is passive, because it has learned the difference between holding firm and holding rigid. It has learned that the wind is not asking for a fight, it is asking for passage. And the tree that gives passage loses nothing. The tree that refuses loses everything. Your emotions are the wind. The 60 seconds are the storm. And the question is not whether you can stand against them. You can, for a while. But whether you can stand within them, whether you can let them blow through without breaking you and without you breaking something else. This is the third way. Not reaction, letting the wind carry you wherever it blows. Not suppression, standing rigid until the wind breaks you from inside, but presence, the living breathing, bending act of feeling everything and choosing what to do with it after, not during, the storm. Begin with the breath. One breath, not a technique, not a pattern. Just one breath that is deeper than the one the surge is demanding. The surge wants shallow breathing. It needs shallow breathing to maintain its intensity. One deep breath is not a cure. It is a crack in the machinery that allows something else, something slower, something wiser to enter. Take that one breath the next time the heat rises, not to calm down, not to suppress, just to remind your body that you are here, that you are choosing, that the 60 seconds belong to you, not to the surge. And in those chosen seconds, something remarkable becomes possible. What the 60 seconds build, the 60 seconds are not just a window of prevention. They are a window of creation. Every time you inhabit the space, every time you feel the full force of the surge and choose your action instead of defaulting to reaction, you do not just avoid damage. You build something that cannot be built any other way. You build trust, not the trust of others, though that comes too, the trust of yourself. The deep, quiet, irreplaceable trust that comes from knowing, not believing, knowing that when the moment is hot, when the stakes are high, when everything inside you is screaming for release, you can hold, you can stay, you can choose. Most people do not trust themselves, not in the moments that matter. They trust themselves in calm rooms, in easy conversations, in the hours when nothing is at stake. But in the 60 seconds, in the white heat of the surge, they do not trust themselves at all. They brace for their own worst impulse. They fear what they might say, what they might sin, what they might do. And that fear becomes a constant low-level anxiety that colors every interaction where emotion is present. But when you have held the space, once, then twice, then 10 times, then 100, that fear begins to dissolve, not because you have conquered your emotions, but because you have proven through action that your emotions do not conquer you. Confidence is often born after action, not before it. You do not become someone who can hold the 60 seconds by believing you can. You become that person by holding them, once, badly, imperfectly, with shaking hands and shallow breath and the mind that is screaming at you to just react already, and then doing it again and again. And each time the space gets a little wider, the search gets a little less totalizing, the stories get a little less convincing, and the person who emerges on the other side of the 60 seconds, the person who speaks after the storm, not during it, that person sounds different, not calmer necessarily, but clearer, more precise, more honest, more themselves. Every day is the practice ground, not the dramatic moments, the small ones, the slow driver in front of you, the coworker who takes credit, the message that is shorter than it should be, the look that might mean nothing or might mean everything. These are not interruptions to your practice. They are the practice. Each one is a 60-second window. Each one is an opportunity to react or to respond. And the accumulation of those choices, invisible and glamorous, witnessed by no one, is the thing that shapes who you become. Begin to notice the small surges, the ones you usually blow past without awareness, the flash of irritation, the twinge of jealousy, the small heat of being overlooked. These are training rounds. They carry the same architecture as the large surges. The body fires, the story forms, the impulse to act arrives, but at a lower intensity. They are the practice that prepares you for the moments when the intensity is high and the stakes are real. Hold those small surges, not to suppress them, to know them, to feel their shape, to watch the story form and loosen your grip on it, to take the one breath, to let the hands be still. And when the large moment arrives, and it will, you will not be meeting it for the first time. You will have met it 1,000 times in its smaller forms, and you will hold, not because you are strong, because you have practiced. Ving, the life on the other side. There is a version of your life that exists on the other side of the 60 seconds. It is not a perfect life. It is not a life without conflict, without pain, without moments that test every boundary you have built. But it is a life where the damage you do is conscious, where the words you speak are chosen, where the decisions you make, even the wrong ones, are made with open eyes instead of closed fists. You remove the impulsive message and trust returns to your relationships. You remove the reactive sentence and conversations become places of honesty instead of wreckage. You remove the panicked decision and your life gains a continuity that reaction always breaks, the continuity of a person who acts from clarity, not from heat. You may not be to blame for the intensity of your surges. You did not choose your nervous system. You did not choose the environments that taught your body to fire fast and hard. You did not choose the wounds that made certain words, certain looks, certain silences feel like threats. But you are responsible for what you do in the 60 seconds that follow. That is your territory. The only territory that has ever truly been yours. Can you feel the full force of your anger and still choose your words? Can you feel the knife of betrayal and not twist it back? Can you sit in the fire of your hurt and let it illuminate instead of destroy? Can you hold the 60 seconds when everything in you says there is no time to hold? Can you trust the person you become after the storm more than the person you are during it? These are not questions you answer once. They are questions you answer every day, in every surge, in every moment that the body ignites and the mind demands immediate action. And the answer is built not from insight, not from understanding, not from reading or listening or agreeing, but from practice, from the 10,000 small moments where you held the space, where you let the story pass without acting on it, where you took the one breath, where you chose against every instinct to wait. That waiting is not weakness. It is the strongest thing you will ever do, because anyone can react. Reaction requires nothing, no training, no discipline, no awareness. It happens on its own. But to hold the space, to stand in the fire of your own feeling and choose your next move with full awareness of the cost, that requires everything you have, and it builds everything worth having. Let your life become the evidence, not your promises, not your apologies after the damage is done, not the story you tell yourself about how next time will be different. Your life, the messages you did not send, the words you chose instead of the words that chose themselves, the doors you did not slam, the relationships that survived because you gave them 60 seconds they did not know they needed. That is mastery, not the absence of the storm, the presence within it. And it begins, every time without exception, in the same place, in the moment after the match is struck, before the fire catches, in the breath between the feeling and the act, in the space that is always there, always available, always waiting for you to notice it. 60 seconds, that is all you need. Not to become someone else, to finally be yourself, the self that exists on the other side of the surge, the self that speaks from clarity, that moves from choice, that builds instead of breaks. That self has been waiting, patiently, in the silence after the 60 seconds end. Go meet them, one breath at a time.